Good morning, honorable members. Senator the Honorable Winston Garvey.
Good morning, one and all. Let us pray. God, we beseech thee, Almighty God, members of the Senate, that we may wisely deliberate for the good of this country and for the glory of thy holy name. Colleagues, join me in the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Thank you, honorable senators. Pray be seated. Honorable members, let me begin by first of all apologizing most profusely for my absence at the special convocation of a meeting of senators to engage the public and have discussions on the museum bill. Rather unfortunately, I was in a serious phase of a migraine attack, took some medication, which normally will put me into deep sleep, and I just did not wake up. So again, I apologize. I did apologize individually to those members who made that meeting, but I wish to apologize to all. Honorable members, the Honorable members, the Speaker and I have been discussing the need and desire to reactivate the Grenada branch of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association. And we are in the process of doing that. Very shortly, notices will go out for a first reactivation meeting. The CPA has been very dormant in Grenada, and we think it's important for us to reactivate it, so I would just wish senators to take note. Most likely that meeting may take place while the houses are in recess, but nonetheless we are hoping that we can do it before that. Finally, senators, I wish to inform that the following senators have tendered excuses. Senator the Honorable George Vincent. He has an overseas engagement which he's doing online, having to do with parliamentary matters, linked to the clerk's office or the speaker's office in the UK. So he's unable to be here. Senator the Honorable Chris Diali has indicated that he would need to be away from the House for a couple hours or so during the course of this morning because of prior engagements which he must attend to. Senator the Honorable Peter David has indicated that he would be late. He has some matters tied up with the court, and then there's a funeral arrangement or a funeral that he will have to attend, but he will be late. And I am seeing that Senator Roberts informed that he would be approximately 30 minutes late. Those are just the notices of lateness and absence from today's sitting of the Senate. Thank you, honorable members.
Item 3, oath of allegiance or formation of a new senator. Item 4, confirmation of minutes.
Senator Steele.
Mr. President, I beg to move that the minutes of the proceedings of a sitting of the Senate held at the Grenada Trade Center on Thursday the 13th and Wednesday the 19th of April 2017 be taken as read.
Members, the question is that the minutes of the proceedings of a sitting of the Senate held at the Grenada Trade Center on Thursday 13th and Wednesday 19th April 2017 be taken as read. All those who have that opinion say aye. To the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Senator Steele.
Mr. President, I beg to move for the confirmation of the minutes of the proceedings of a sitting of the Senate held at the Grenada Trade Center on Thursday the 13th and Wednesday the 19th of April 2017.
The question is that the minutes under reference be confirmed. All those who have that opinion say aye. To the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes do indeed have it.
Item 5, messages from the Governor General. Item 6, announcements by Mr. President. Item 7, ministerial statements.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to say a pleasant good morning to all my fellow senators here today, and of course to you, Mr. President. At the Ministry of Youth and Sports Religious Affairs, we are embarking on a number of activities, number of programs that can help to reach our young people, to provide the requirements that which they need so that they can make it in this life, that we all have challenges with, this life that we face, this challenging life. I just want to speak specifically to, at first, the two main programs that we are working on. We did promise our young people that we would give them some hope. We have actually been harnessing the opportunities to harnessing the opportunities for people empowerment. That is basically what hope means. So we have been endeavoring to do that. We have promised to do that. And I want to announce that 2 weeks ago, we were able to launch that program at our ministry. Nearly 400 young Imani trainees were selected by the ministries because, they came from the public service, mainly, only from the public service. They were selected because they have actually been excelling. They have been doing well. They have been, giving good service. They've been going beyond the call of duties. They have been selected because of all of those things, and we were going through a number of challenges in how best to reward these young people based on the fact that we were in a structural adjustment program, and of course we do have to continue to display some level of fiscal discipline even though that we would be out of that program. We had to find a way that would make these young people feel appreciated for all the efforts that they have made. Because, Mr. President, I want this Honorable House to know that some of these young people, they work as hard as many of the, long-serving co-workers who are in prominent positions. And since it wasn't possible to give them the prominent positions that they deserve, we decided that we would find a way to reward them. And so we've given them rewards in 3 basic areas. Those 400 young Imani trainees have been promoted to the HOPE program with 1, an increased allowance, 2, increased vacation time, and 3, a guaranteed 18 months extension on the Imani program. Another area that they have an opportunity for moving forward for permanent employment, that is possible. We can't guarantee all 400 of them such, but many of them have an opportunity at permanent employment. They have to continue to work very hard for it, Mr. President. We want to make that extremely clear that despite the fact that our ministry has rewarded these young people, we expect them to continue in their good performance. We expect them to excel. We expect them to strive towards those permanent positions. And, we can at least assure them that once permanent positions are available, that position is available, that they would, of course, have the first preference. And we just want to ensure that they work for it. And we also want to make it very clear that any one of them who fail to perform would lose that opportunity. Not just the opportunity at a permanent position, but they would lose all of their rewards and they would lose the opportunity to be part of the program. This is really to ensure, Mr. President, that we continue to promote productivity in the workplace among our young people. We know the challenges that they face, and we want to ensure that we make it all abundantly clear that we expect them to work well. We expect them to put in all their best efforts. Hence the reason why we have given them those awards, basically to motivate them to continue to do their best. As happy as we are today to boast of that achievement, something that was promised to them as part of the rewards, we are very much aware that, our program is not without its challenges. And although the program was launched just a couple weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, we have already faced 1 or 2 challenges that are now being addressed. So as they arise, as the challenges arise, we would address them and we would ensure that our ministry continues to focus on improvement. So it means, therefore, that as a ministry we have to listen, we have to pay attention to what, those areas that come forth to us as areas that are in need of serious attention, so that we can continue to provide good services to our young people, so that they can continue in our footsteps, will actually do much better than us. We have a young, vibrant group out there. They are capable of bringing this country forward, and so we have to ensure that we put all systems in place for that. So as a ministry, we are committed to the continuous improvement of our programs and services to our young people. Very shortly, Mr. President, during the month of July, we'll be launching yet another program. And the purpose of that program is really to rectify one of the issues that has been coming up, one of the challenges that we have been facing in all of our youth programs at the Ministry of Youth and Sports. I mentioned when we met at this Honorable House that it was discovered that our programs are predominantly females, many young women are in our youth programs. And we realize that our males are getting left behind. We know the challenges that males face in this country and all other Caribbean islands and even worldwide. This is an issue that we have to address. We have to ensure that our males are not left behind on the streets, on the blocks, in jail, getting into trouble. So we would continue to endeavor to ensure, in addition to all the other programs that we have decided as a ministry to rectify this issue. And so, to ensure that our male population increase in our youth programs from 20% and upwards, we would be adding to our youth program by we'll be adding 500 young males into a program that would start very soon. It would be, of course, male only, ages 18 to 35 years old. Young men who need a second chance, young men who need someone to believe in them, young men who need a helping hand, someone to help them face and cope with all the challenges of life. And so it is our hope to provide them with the tools that is needed so that they can have another chance at life, the tools that's also needed to start a business, and the tools that is needed for them to succeed in life. So this group of young men, all 500 of them, would be engaged in a program that's a little different from the traditional Imani program. Their life skills courses would be more fun, engaging, more practical, very, very practical life skills programs. They will also have an opportunity, the main aspect of the program would be the apprenticeship, where they would learn the skills of a trade as has been done traditionally. It has not failed our country. Many of our very experienced mechanics, many of our very experienced cooks, our very experienced farmers and carpenters, all construction workers, landscapers, they learned their skill by working along with someone. So we would be doing an apprenticeship type program in which these young men would have an opportunity to save $100 from their stipend that would go towards a loan at the end. We can match it with a loan so that they can use it to purchase tools, equipment, so that they themselves can be employable. We want to give the young men of this nation the opportunity to make decisions for themselves, make a choice. A young man should have a choice to make and decide whether he should rob someone's produce on their farm or plant it himself, whether he should rob his neighbor or offer the services or the skills that he would have learned, and so get money from that neighbor to function and so do what he has to do in order to survive. So at the end of it all, Mr. President, basically we want to empower our young males, make them feel good about themselves, give them the skills that is needed to survive. And so this new program would run for 1 year, and it's called just simply Empower. Empower program would be launched very shortly. Like I said, Mr. President, if we succeed at this, and we have our young men just making good choices, we would of course have less crime rate. We would have reduced all the social ills in our country, and this is really what we want to do as a ministry. We also launched a Fly project, similar to what we had in Rose Hill, that was done in Carriacou just 3 weeks ago, where 40 youths have been engaged. They will be exposed to professional developmental skills. Can I have 1 minute to wrap up, sir? Yes, thank you. Yes, numeracy, literacy, and also technical skills. We also plan to do this in 3 other areas throughout Grenada over the next few months. Mr. President, I just want to end by calling on our private, calling on our private sector. We have a good relationship with them in training our young persons, and we just want them to know that government has been doing all that it can to maintain that relationship, and that we can't really do it alone. we call on them to start the payment process of the 50% towards the stipend. And during the next few months, we'll be working to ensure that that is completed, that agreement is seen to. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Honorable Brenda Hood.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I too want to wish everyone a pleasant day in the Senate as we do the work of the nation. I stand here this...
We can hardly hear, I can hardly hear what's being said.
Are you hearing me better now? Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise this morning to give an update on the activities that were held in the Ministry of Tourism, Civil Aviation, Culture, and Cooperatives, the Ministry of Culture and Cooperatives, of which I represent. Mr. President, we all recognize the importance of culture towards the development of every nation. We know that throughout the world, the performing arts is one of the major economic activity that take place. As a matter of fact, it's $1 billion business throughout the world. Here in Grenada, we have only started to scratch the surface. I want to inform the Senate that we will continue to do whatever is necessary to make sure that that industry grows from strength to strength. Mr. President, just a few weeks ago, we had a strong delegation from the FCCA that came here to Grenada to meet with stakeholders. They met with the Ministry of Tourism, the Tourism Authority, the Ports Authority, the Marketing and National Importing Board, and GREP, the Ports Authority. This meeting, Mr. President, were to discuss the way forward as we try to improve and work towards the improvement of the cruise industry. At the meeting, Mr. President, the area of purchasing, where they can purchase a produce here on the island, was highly discussed. As a matter of fact, this discussion started last year, and they came in to look at ways in which we can move it forward. I'm very pleased to report, Mr. President, that the Marketing Board is working very closely with the FCCA to make sure that our produce are on the ships when they come to our destination. I know that they are very close in signing that agreement, and I'm confident that our farmers will benefit from this new move. Additionally, Mr. President, the idea of having cruise ships all year round were discussed. And this is an initiative that the Ports Authority are looking at putting a proposal together so they can take it to Cabinet. Because as you know, if a ship comes here all year round, they would want incentives. I'm not too sure what they're asking for. But this is something that must be approved by the Cabinet of the country, and whatever we do will be in the best interest of the country. I also want to say that MAREP made a presentation to them, and they were making the presentation as it relates to employment opportunities. Again, that is another area that we in the Caribbean are not benefiting a lot from because of this situation that exists. If you go on a cruise ship all over the world, you see a lot of Filipinos on those ships. But they come to the Caribbean, and the majority of workers are people from outside of the Caribbean. We did say that this has to change, and as a matter of fact, the cruise industry, the executives are saying people are asking for Caribbean employees. As we speak at this point, we already have over 200 young persons who have been trained to go and work on those cruise ships. Considerations are being made at this time with the FCCA so that these persons can get employment on those ships. Additionally, Mr. President, we believe that the product that we offer has to be improved. I know that the Tourism Authority and the Ministry of Tourism are working aggressively to make sure that we have new products for the next season that will start very soon in September in the fall. And efforts are being made that these products are products that we all will be proud of. The whole idea of community tourism is something that the ministry is working aggressively towards, so that the revenue that are raised throughout the length and breadth of this country are circulated throughout the length and breadth of the country. The Minister for Tourism have just signed an agreement while she was in Aruba in New York to deal with the Air Bed and Breakfast program, whereby persons will be given opportunities to open up their homes to persons coming to the destination. As you're aware, Mr. President, a lot of the times persons, when they travel to various parts of the world, do not always want to live in the very upscale hotels. They don't mind staying with families or in guest house. So we are hoping that this program will kick off and that many persons will get some economic activities going on in their communities. So, Mr. President, I am very impressed with what is taking place. I know that the Ministry of Tourism also, and the Airlift Committee that was formed a long time ago, they are working to get more cruise ships and also airlines coming to the destination. The Airlift Committee is only responsible for airlift. And the minister had indicated last week that very soon, I'm not too sure if they started today, that Liat will commence its 6 o'clock trip every morning to Trinidad very soon. That is an arrangement that was made by the minister. And there will be another flight coming in from Barbados during the day also. So it means that we are improving on the flight, because I know when we lost that Liat flight, it was a challenge for a lot of persons wanting to get to Trinidad so that they can go on or they can apply for a visa or so. So I'm very pleased to report today that this, if it didn't start last week, it will commence very shortly, because we have signed the contract. With regards to culture, Mr. President, as I said before, that the entertainment industry is a multi-billion industry, and I believe there are room for improvement. I must report here that how impressed I am with all of the many young artists that are coming forward and moving forward. Just recently, we had the Pure Grenada Music Festival. We also had another festival, and the amount of Grenadians that are performing and doing extremely well, I am impressed. And many of them, Mr. President, benefited from the school orchestra program that the Ministry of Culture started many years ago. I want to say that this is a program, when we came back into office in 2013, we felt it was important to bring that school orchestra operating, because as you know, Mr. President, I think you have also expressed this here in this Senate, that when you engage your young people in these positive industries and after-school activities, you don't find them getting themselves into difficulties. They are challenging their energies in a very positive way. And this is why a lot of the extracurricular activities that are being taught in schools are so important and need to be encouraged by every one of us. I must also state in this Senate that only a month or so ago, we hosted the Grenada Global Festival. This is a festival that I spoke about here a while ago. And this is the first year it was hosted. And it was a bit downscale because we wanted to engage as many young people as possible to get exposure as to what are the opportunities in the film industry. I must say that we did have some people who came in to speak to the young people. We had representations from 5 schools. The event was held here when we had the training and the forum, and they were able to engage and ask questions and look at opportunities that are available in the industry. Then the next day we had an open air video. We showed movies in the park, in Camahan Park. It was well received because what we have done at the ministry level, we have purchased a very large screen where we will be showing movies throughout the length and breadth of the country. So we have started in the Camahan Park, and the plan is to work with the Film Commission and to move throughout the length and breadth of the country so that people can have that exposure. As I speak at this time, the Film Commissioner, she's in Cuba attending a workshop looking at ways in which the Caribbean can work together to improve, because that's an industry where there are lots of potential. There are lots of opportunities. And we believe that we cannot just sit back and just depend on tourism. We have to look at other ways of finding ways in which we can train our people at every level so that they can create employment for themselves and their families. Mr. President, in the area of cooperatives, I believe as a minister responsible for cooperatives that government cannot do it alone, that we need to find ways where we can engage people so that they can create employment for themselves. And that is one of the roles of the cooperative. What we have been doing is going out. There are programs on the radio. The Department of Cooperatives are having programs on the radio, are having programs on the television. They have developed brochures, and they are meeting with communities to engage persons, to let them know it is okay to be self-employed. There is nothing wrong with that. You may not make lots of money to begin, but in the long run, you have to stick at it, and there will be opportunities. I'm pleased to report here that only 2 months ago, we brought in someone to do some training in batik with 60 women throughout the length and breadth of this country. Last month, we had some discussions with the same person. She met with women in Carriacou, and we had an women's economic forum here not too long ago, and there were over 60 women participating. And they have all expressed an interest in starting up their own businesses. We are looking at ways in which we can help these persons to find the resources so that they can begin to start their own businesses. As I speak, I know there are a group of young men in St. Andrews who are starting the poultry cooperatives. There are some of them who are working with the Ministry of Agriculture. These cooperatives will be formed shortly, and that is in agriculture. And these are lots of young men who love they are Imanis, I'm being told, and they want to start their own businesses, because I think this is important. You start now and you build on it. It will take a while, but eventually they are building a business for themselves and their families as they go on. So, Mr. President, we are making sure that we are creating a cadre of young people who understands that employment doesn't always have to come from someone else. You can create it for yourselves. And as we are very much aware, we are not only providing the skills training and so for our young people, but many of them who want to move academically into academics, to be professionals, they are also encouraged. Opportunities are given to them. So at the end of the day, we want to have populations of persons who are able to fend wherever they go. And this is what this is all about, Mr. President. I also want to say, Mr. President, CARIFESTA, next CARIFESTA will be held in August, and there will be a delegation from Grenada going to CARIFESTA. It will be led by the Ministry of Culture, and I want to say that we are very impressed with what will be taking place. Not only will be the culture and the music, but also the culture as it relates to craft and art. The Ministry of Trade have been invited to participate, and all of the members who will be participating in CARIFESTA, they will also have other activities. I believe that CARICOM understands that you need to also expose your artisans. You need to bring them out so that persons from all over the world can see what we have to offer here in the Caribbean. Mr. President, it was just a few weeks ago I went to an event, and I was so impressed with the quality of work that our people are doing, and I'm talking about arts and craft. There are bags, there are clothing, and many of them, they didn't even go to school to learn it. They learned it naturally. So we have talents here. Mr. President, I'm sorry. I should have asked you for one more minute. Okay, thank you. Okay. And finally, before I forget, we are in the season of Spice Mass. And as you know, the Carnival City commenced last week, 2 weeks ago. It's on the Carenage where it was held last year. It is every Thursday from 8 p.m. on the Carenage. All of the events will commence. I believe that some of the events will commence next month, July. And as I speak, the request from so many persons to come to Grenada is remarkable. We are foreseeing this is going to be a bumper event this year because there are so many persons who have expressed an interest in either coming to Grenada to participate in our Spice Mass or just to be there to have a look. I want to say and to encourage as many persons as possible to support the activities that are held in your various communities, in your parishes, and to also support our national Spice Mass. It's one of the best in the world. It's one of the best in the region. It's the last Spice Mass in the region. And this is why we believe that it is growing from strength to strength, because the persons who travel Carnival throughout the world would like to come to Grenada. We promote Grenada as one of the safest places in the world. We would want it to continue that way. And we want to encourage Grenadians to invite and to welcome our visitors when they come. And we will have a good time. I thank you, Mr. President.
Senator, the Honorable Winston.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, just before I commence, I just want to have an idea. When the bell rings, do we have 2 minutes more or? Okay, so that's the time for begging. That's what they're saying.
That it's important information. Of course, it gives the other side an opportunity to pry into your statement to find out more. So I've been a bit liberal on it, but I'm mindful that my duty is to curb abuse.
Okay, and you know very well I'm not one that participates in abuse.
Well, we shall see.
Abuses and so forth. Well, thank you very much, Mr. President, and good morning to one and all. Today I want to highlight just 5 of the areas in which I am required to speak on: Ministry of Health, Ministry of Works, GIS, NADMA, and the School Uniform Program. Just to inform the nation that the School Uniform Program Assistance Program, spearheaded by the Prime Minister's Ministry, will be launched on the 4th of July. That's Tuesday, the 4th of July. And last year, judging from last year where we had over 5,000 applications, or 5,000 families benefiting from this program, we believe we may have a similar number. But the objective here, Mr. President, is to ensure that our students who need that sort of support is given that support in terms of the school uniform and small stationaries, because as you know, the school books program continues. So this is an additional support that they receive. And I know my dear leader of government business will pry somewhat and speak a little on the school books program. I wouldn't want to venture further here, but just to say that the school uniform program continues, and I look forward to presenting those vouchers to our needy students come the 4th of July. Mr. President, a new day has dawned in the provision of health care for the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique with the establishment of the electronic medical record system. Mr. President, only recently, 7 health centers on the island, namely St. David's, Surtees, and St. Patrick. We have Granbras in St. Andrews, Granans in St. George, Hillsborough in Carriacou, and Guelph St. John's, as well as the town of St. George, all receive this very important system. What it does, Mr. President, and before I go this, I just want to take a moment and thank the implementation department within the Ministry of Health, along with our Canadian health system, our partners, for ensuring this became a reality. So people visiting any of these health centers, Mr. President, now will have the medical records available electronically for the healthcare provider to see. This facility will translate into a higher level of efficiency in the provision of service to our people. This is an extremely very good development for this country. So we're moving into the first world status, and that's the objective here, to bring this country forward, and it is with health. And I'm going to say I know our people are very happy with this development. Under the Ministry of Works, Mr. President, I am pleased to inform that a $29 million Houses of Parliament project is well on its way. It's on schedule. The last batch of steel was received from China, and we look forward to utilizing this new modern facility early in 2018. I know we all looking forward to it. Also, Mr. President, I want to speak to some of the concrete projects. The $1.15 million Bellevue to Mount Morris Road project, a project funded by the government of India and Grenada, is well on its way. It is scheduled to complete in July. This road facility, Mr. President, was long in coming. It's extremely important for the residents, and you can listen to their call in on the radio program, how much this has assisted in making life better for them. How much this has assisted in ensuring that the farmers can produce and they can get the produce out easier than they were doing before. Because now we have transport being able to go way up the hill. I took an opportunity to go and visit the people up there just to have an idea, Mr. President, to know how much this development is contributing to better life. And I love the responses I've received, because the people recognize that a caring government is one that will ensure that the infrastructure they have to use will be developed. And this is what we are doing at this time. Mr. President, as you know, the English government would have provided a grant of some $300 million to the region. Grenada got its own portion, and 12 million of this amount that we've received, which is around 28, 29 million, is earmarked or dedicated to the western corridor of St. Mark's and St. John to ensure that infrastructure development in this area, the road network and so forth, is upgraded to make life easier and better for the users of this side of the country. The remainder of the monies will be utilized by NAWASA to ensure that with this development in this country, with this ongoing development that we're seeing, the need for more potable drinking water and the use and the work of NAWASA is becoming greater. So some of this monies has been dedicated to NAWASA to ensure that their projects is well on the way. It's not enough. We needed some $6 million more, but CDB has graciously come forward and granted us a loan in this regard. The intention is to move the road inwards to mitigate against the many landslips and precipices along this western corridor, Mr. President. We can recall the number of fatalities along this road. So we want to do something that will impact the livelihood, will impact life on a whole of persons using this corridor. As I've said before, we will move the road inwards to mitigate against those precipices. But what is extremely important here with this, Mr. President, is that some folks are not seeing this as development, because they're still saying nothing is happening. But anyhow, those who have eyes to see, let them see. Mr. President, I want to state on record that the people of St. Mark will soon be getting a community complex, the Union Community Complex. This complex is funded by the Indian government. Government is required to put in the infrastructure, which is in the cost of $1.2 million. But the objective here is to ensure that we do our part and to give the people of St. Mark that facility. And I trust as we construct that facility, it will be able to be designated as a primary shelter for disaster management. I know right now St. Mark is concerned because they do not have any primary shelters. But I am saying to you, your government is at work. Things are happening. I want to turn now, Mr. President, to the work of NADMA. Only recently, Mr. President, through the assistance of USAID OFDA, we conducted a 2-day contingency planning workshop for the public sector. What this is basically about, Mr. President, is to help our public sector to understand the dangers that we are faced with in this ever-changing global environment. We are exposed to the effects of climate change and disasters on a whole. The contingency planning project, a workshop, was designed to help government establishment, to help the sector to rebound at a faster time than before. So we put necessary structures in place, ensure plans were developed, and people have a better working knowledge as to what needs to be done prior to and after an impact. But most of all, to get back business up and running in the shortest possible time. We will continue to embark on such training because the objective here is to ensure that all departments are given the opportunity to be developed and be able to respond adequately when a need arises. Only last week, Mr. President, we had a Tsunami Ready program training workshop. The USAID again supported a 4-day training in a software commit for technicians from 6 entities. The software, which was developed by the US-based National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, and that's the Center for Tsunami Research, provided a user-friendly interface to generate tsunami simulations for both predefined and custom sources. Tsunami numerical modeling is essential in estimating inundation effects for specific tsunami source mechanism and has proven to be a valuable tool for emergency management officials to test protocols and preparedness. The training is part of Grenada's requirement to launch its Tsunami Ready program on November the 5th, 2017, which is World Tsunami Day. As an outcome of this workshop, participants would begin the process of developing inundation maps for St. Patrick's as a pilot project in preparation for the launch. As we know, St. Patrick, very close to the live underwater Kikemjeni volcano, and it was our desire to ensure that we work with the residents of St. Patrick's and to develop a protocol that in the event of an emergency posed by Kikemjeni, they will know exactly what to do. So we'll be putting up signage, yes, the inundation maps, the market route, the muster points, all those things will be developed. So in the event of an emergency or a threat from Kikemjeni, the residents will know exactly where to go and how to get there. That's the objective here. We also want to say a special thank you to the U.S. Southern Command for a site visit which they had earlier. Mr. President, could I get 2 minutes, thanks? Okay, thanks. The objective of the visit was to do a site mapping of the proposed area or site for the construction of the new NADMA headquarters, which will be in Manjalo, St. George's. $1.4 million has been earmarked for this project. There is also monies available for the construction of another center in Carriacou, which I'll leave my able senator from Carriacou to speak about. But the point here, Grenada has been able to make its mark. And we are seeing, as we ask, persons around the world is coming forward to give us support. And I want to end by speaking on the GIS. Mr. President, Signed, Sealed, and Delivered 2. What is this? A magazine program, a very creative and professionally produced product by the highly skilled and motivated staff of the GIS. This second page of Signed, Sealed, and Delivered highlighted projects in government ministries, including pension reform, prison transformation, agricultural revitalization, nurses and teachers full-time status, the new NADMA headquarters, and the Hope Imani project. The program was completed and disseminated to the major media houses around the country, but of course premiered on GIS. The point here, Mr. President, as a government, yes, we have been doing quite a lot, but we understand if we do not share it with our people, it will be just like a tree falling in the forest with nobody being there. So we said no noise was created. But as a forward-thinking administration, we understand. We want to bring our people along with us. And we are creating all the necessary programs, but capturing them and then presenting them to the world so that they will know Grenada is moving ahead. Grenada is on the way up. And Grenada will continue to shine because this administration understands in order for us to develop, we must create the environment. And we are doing that with all the sectors in this country. Mr. President, I thank you.
Honorable Nolan Cox.
Thank you very much.
I was just waiting to see if there were any questions. That's why I...
No problem. No problem,
But you have the
Mr.
floor.
President. Thank you very much, Mr. President. And let me say a pleasant morning to all members in this honorable chamber. I stand to give some report on activities within the Ministry of Carriacou and Petite Martinique Affairs. Mr. President, I wish to inform this honorable House that the ministry continues to work for the people of Carriacou and Petite Martinique, and in so doing, we wish to take this opportunity to report on the continued work we have been doing on our important project, our water project. We are happy to inform the nation through this honorable House that we have continued to work with our partner, our important development partner, that is the Caribbean Community Climate Change Center in Belize, which is the 5Cs. And they have secured a sum of $600,000 through an international partner, through the Italian government, to aid with the expansion of the water distribution network within Carriacou. We hope to see this expansion project take pipe-borne water throughout the island. Currently, water is available just within the confines of Hillsborough, serving just approximately about 43 customers. However, I must take this opportunity to express thanks to the people and customers within Hillsborough area who have been experiencing some disruption, and for their understanding and for allowing us to rectify that problem. But we are working to expand the project and to get the system up, back and running. We had some issues with the pump, but it's on order and it should be here shortly. In that light, Mr. President, we also wish to indicate that we are also working together with 5Cs through 5Cs with the USAID for some extra funding also to support the expansion project. And that has been going on right now, and we are working closely with NAWASA, our local partner, who is providing technical support and all the necessary guidance for that expansion of that water project. We really want to express our thanks to NAWASA for working with us and to ensure that we bring water to the people of Carriacou and Petite Martinique, which they so badly need, especially in time of dry season. We also wish to inform this Honorable House, Mr. President, that currently connections are ongoing in Petite Martinique, and right now we have approximately 63, in excess of 60 persons who are connected to that water system and are receiving potable water reliably, and we really want to commend NAWASA, and all our partners, and of course the people of Pitimatlik, for working together with us to ensure that this project is realized and a success. So Pitimatlik is being connected, and we're happy that that is happening. We know that there are some outstanding connections, but work is currently ongoing to have those persons connected. So, Mr. President, as regards to the water project, we are very pleased how it is progressing. A lot of work has gone into this. A lot of persons would have given a lot to ensure that this project is realized and to ensure that the opportunities that we see that will be created from having ample supply of water in Carriacou. We believe that businesses, agriculture, there's great potential for expansion in the agriculture sector, great potential for expansion in the hotel and tourism sector once we have ample supply of water. So we know how much this will benefit us going forward, Mr. President. Mr. President, I want to take this opportunity to also inform this Honorable House and of course the listening nation that the Ministry has received approval for the construction of a new EOC building for our NADMA section in Carriacou, and with support from the U.S. Southern Command and of course NADMA in Grenada. We believe that this facility is very timely. We recognize that this also fills that gap, that important gap in terms of our disaster preparedness and mitigation infrastructure. We do not have that facility right now, and we believe that that facility will help bridge the gap and to help us prepare better for any disaster, natural disaster that may occur, which of course we hope none occurs. We know the devastation that it causes and it creates for our people, but it's important that we prepare in the best way possible to help mitigate against it and to help for us to recover from any disaster that may so occur. Mr. President, this is all that I have to report on for the Ministry of Carriacou and Pitimatnik Affairs at this point in time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Cox. Senator, the Honorable Simon Steele.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I wish to provide an update on the ministry that I have responsibility for, the Ministry of Education, Human Resource Development, and the Environment. So, Mr. President, let me start by taking this opportunity to congratulate students, teachers, and parents for this year's CPEA exam results. In total, 1,917 students sat the Caribbean Primary Exit Assessment exam, and the number of students that passed this exam compared to those that were retained has increased. The number of students retained, that is, those that did not attain the minimum level, reduced from 232 students that were retained in 2016 down to 189 students that were retained this year. And again, it is down on the number of 272 students retained in 2015. So, Mr. President, we're moving in the right direction in terms of increasing those students that pass that exam and transition on to secondary school. Those students, Mr. President, those that are under the age of 14 who did not pass will have an opportunity to resit in 2018, and those that are over the age of 14 will have an opportunity to sit the National School Leaving Examination again in 2018. So those children have an opportunity still to attain a quality certificate on leaving primary school. Mr. President, we also saw improvements in the exam results. So the national average grade in 2016 increased to just under 70%. So 70 out of 100 was the average mark obtained, and that is up from 2016, up from 2015, up from 2014. the pass rate, which is 50%, the pass rate, the number of students passing, also increased. The pass rate in 2017 was 90.1%, up from 2016, up from 2015, where the average mark was 85%. So again, Mr. President, we're moving in the right direction. By subject, we saw increases in the average grades and the pass rate, for English and for science. So in English in 2017, it was 64.5%, up from 2016, up from 2015. Science, again, we saw an increase up to 67.54%. Where we're still seeing some challenges is in the area of mathematics, which we saw a slight decrease. So the pass rate there was, the average mark there was 57.16%, down on 2016, but up from the results that we saw in 2015. So, Mr. President, at the primary level, we continue to see positive improvements. We continue to see, though, a disparity in the performance of boys against girls. We know that this is an issue that we face within the region as a whole. And within the ministry as a government, we are taking both a regional and national approach in terms of trying to address this, this regional disparity. But what we are seeing, Mr. President, are improvements in the quality and the level of attainment of our students that are transitioning from primary school to secondary school, which is a key objective of this administration. Now, moving on to scholarships, we continue to secure record numbers of scholarships for our young men and women. This year, to date, Mr. President, we've had 12 scholarship awards from the Cuban government. That includes postgraduate studies to a value of $4.7 million. St. George's University, 45 scholarships have been awarded to a value of $16 million. Trinidad and Tobago, 10 scholarships, including graduate studies. And the People's Republic of China, 8 masters and 13 undergraduate awards. So, Mr. President, to date, since we came into office in 2013, we've awarded somewhere in the region of 800 scholarships, Mr. President, 800 scholarships to our youth. And that is to a value in excess of $100 million. Significant numbers and significant opportunities, and a significant sign of this government's commitment, not just to tertiary education, but also to the investment in our youth. And these are in a wide range of areas, where it's medicine, pharmacology, public health, nursing, dental surgery, the sciences, business, engineering, education, agriculture, tourism, hospitality, accounting, all of those key areas, Mr. President, that are critical to our national development. Now, moving on to TAMCC and an update of where we are, we have 3 key initiatives that are ongoing, seeking to transform TAMCC into a premier community college within the region. So first of all, we have the strategic partnership with the Petner Foundation and McMaster University out of Canada. We have the organizational restructuring, trying to bring efficiencies to the management and the administration of the college. And then engagement with the Caribbean Development Bank, looking at the infrastructural development of the campus site. So first of all, the relationship with Petner and McMaster. As we are aware, the Memorandum of Understanding was signed last year, at the end of last year, and this is a strategic partnership that was led by Nicholas Brathwaite. He's providing his vision, his guidance, and financing behind this initiative. And then McMaster University, which is one of the world's leading academic institutions. And this is a 5-year partnership, which is, as I said, looking to see how we can transform the teaching quality and the learning experience within TAMCC. And that ranges from curriculum development, looking at what is being taught, ensuring that it's relevant and it links into our national development plans, not just for today, but also in the future, and building teaching capacity. So we're focusing not only on what is being taught, but how we are teaching. So progress to date, Mr. President. There have been a number of exchanges between key faculty members and McMaster University in Canada. So to date, 20 senior staff members have attended various training courses in Canada looking at instructional skills and faculty development facilitation. So these are looking at the area of how we teach, improving the teaching quality within the college. And then there have been sessions on what they call community of practice. So this is how to foster within the college using international best practices and how that can circustrate through the college and through the teaching faculty. Senior members have participated in various educational development programs in Canada, again, with the aim of establishing a teaching and learning educational structure, again, based on international best practices. Senior officers and students have attended programs that are seeking to develop what they call a student partnering program, where the students themselves actually get more actively involved in the teaching process. So they're not only there to teach, but also to, not only to learn, but to engage in that teaching process, so peer-to-peer engagement. And then the area of curriculum and quality assurance, committees have been formed to look at the review of the curriculum, the quality of that curriculum, to further develop that. So to date, Mr. President, or to the end of this year, we would have somewhere in the region of 30 teachers trained, with 10 additional teachers trained in facility development workshops. So that's 40 members of the teaching staff who will be involved in this program this year alone. There have been the establishment of a number of committees, again, driving through this reform process, whether it is looking at the leadership and the recruitment of senior leaders within the college who are going to drive this transformation process, the infrastructural development elements and the implementation of the organizational restructuring. Regarding the engagement with the Caribbean Development Bank, we're securing $500,000 US, Mr. President, that will be used in technical assistance, looking at how we develop the physical infrastructure at all of the campus sites. That's the redevelopment of Tantine, Mirabeau, St. Patrick's, and Carriacou. So some significant work is taking place there. Mr. President, moving on to the Environment Division. Myself, together with representatives from the Ministry of Finance and the Grenada Development Bank, who have the titles of the National Designated Authority and the Direct Access Entity, attended a structured dialogue with the Green Climate Fund in Belize last week. The Green Climate Fund is a UN body that was established after the Paris Agreement in 2015, which currently has funds of $10 billion US, which will be used for climate-related projects. And that fund is due to increase to $100 billion per year from 2020. So there are significant opportunities globally, but certainly for Grenada in terms of directly accessing those significant funds. So, Mr. President, we had an opportunity to meet with senior management within the Green Climate Fund and board members to discuss how Grenada could get better access to the fund, get better access to the funding opportunities that exist, to build relationships with the senior management team both within the region and internationally. And we had the opportunity to discuss a significant project that has been submitted already to the Green Climate Fund, an $81 million water project, the Climate Resilient Water Sector project, in conjunction with support from the German agency GIZ, which will be looking to see how we can increase our water storage, our water treatment, and water distribution capabilities here in Grenada. So, Mr. President, Grenada is seeking to gain direct access to the Green Climate Fund. So rather than going through various third parties, just 30 seconds more, Mr. President. So instead of going through third parties, Grenada will be able to have direct access. And the opportunities and the areas that we're in discussion with them about is in the energy development sector, looking at things like geothermal, renewables, etc., agriculture, the whole area of food security, tourism, climate resilient infrastructure, so that's a residential level, our roads, our sea defenses, and also opportunities for our private sector in the area of energy efficiency. So, Mr. President, on that note, I'd like to end my update. I thank you.
President, can I ask a question? Thank you, Mr. President, and my humble apologies for the few minutes late.
We did get your advice. I say I did get your advice.
Very good.
And I announced that you had indicated that you were going to be a bit late. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you to the leader of government business. Wonderful to have 800 scholarships. But I'm suggesting, is it possible that at a future session you can give us a listing of the respective areas of the scholarships that were granted by the government over the last 4 years?
Mr. President, I thought I just went through some of those areas in my presentation. So it's the areas of medicine, pharmacology, engineering, the sciences, agriculture, tourism, at all levels, whether it's undergraduate, whether it's graduate studies, whether it's postgraduate studies. But if you are seeking details, precise details from those educational establishments, please ask.
Mr. President, can I just make myself a little more clear? I'm asking if it is possible that we can be given a copy of the 800 scholarships, the respective areas documented in the last 4 years. That's what I'm asking for. I heard what he said, but I'm asking for a listing.
Okay. Senator Roberts, you want to put that in the form of a question, which you could submit? Yes? Otherwise, we'll have this whole morning. Yes?
Item 8, presentation of papers and reports from select committees.
Mr. President, I beg to move that the following papers be laid on the table. Annual report of the National Insurance Scheme NAS for the year ended 31st of December 2015. 2. Annual report, financial statement and audit report thereon of the Grenada Industrial Development Corporation, GIDC, for the year ended 31st of December 2015. 3. Audit report number 1 of 2017, a report of the Director of Audit, Grenada, on the financial statements for the year ended 31st of December 2015 for the Office of the Ombudsman. 4. Annual report of the Grenada Development Bank for the year ended 31st December 2016. 5. Annual report of the Grenada Authority for the Regulation of Financial Institutions, GARFIN, for the year ended 31st December 2016. And 6. The annual report number 2 of 2017, a report of the Director of Audit, Grenada, on the financial statements of the Grenada National Training Agency for the year ended 31st December 2016.
I do direct that the following papers: 1. Annual report of the National Insurance Scheme, NIS, for the year ending 31st of December 2015. Annual report. financial statement and audit report thereon of the General Industrial Development Corporation, GIDC, for the year ending 31st of December 2015. 3. Audit report number 1 of 2017, report of the Director of Audit, Grenada, on the financial statements for the year ending 31st of December 2015 for the Office of the Ombudsman. 4. Annual report of the General Development of Grenada Development Bank for the year ending 31st of December 2016. 5. Annual report of the Grenada Authority for the Regulation of Financial Institutions, GAFIN, for the year ending 31st of December 2016. And 6. Annual report number 2 of 2017, report of the Director of Audit, Grenada, on the financial statements of the Grenada National Training Agency, GNTA, for the year ending the 31st December 2016, be so laid.
Item 9, petitions. Item 10, government notices. Item 11, unofficial notices. Item 12, questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Will the Leader of Government Business ascertain from the Parliamentary Electoral Office the state of readiness of his office and staff if a general election is called at this time? B, with some of the most experienced officers at the Electoral Office being replaced, what immediate program of training is in place to ensure the competence of the new workers? C, what measures are being taken by the Supervisor of Elections to ensure the nation and the wider community that the integrity of the institution is sound and is beyond reproach? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I have written responses from the Parliamentary Elections Office, so I can circulate these. So. Mr. President, it is indicated that a written response is required, but I am happy to read out again on behalf
Indicated of the... where?
Sorry? Well, there's not an asterisk against the question. It's only asterisk questions that a verbal response is actually requested. That's my understanding of the protocol. But as I said, I'm happy to give a verbal response.
Oh.
But as I said, I'm happy to give a verbal response.
Well, I don't know that you were asked for one.
Okay, well then I'm comfortable to leave it as such.
Adrian, you can proceed. Keith. Keith Loden. Senator the Honorable Keith Loden.
I thought, Mr. President, we would have been afforded an opportunity to read the responses, the written responses, but if we are to continue, I have my questions, and thank you for the opportunity. Mr. President, these questions standing in my name are directed to the Leader of Government's Business, Honorable Simon Steele. Question number 1, A. Why has a foreign investor with a Grenadian registered company, Grenada Quality Meats Inc., who has been granted 10 acres of prime cultivated agricultural lands on the Laura Estate, Crown Lands, over 3 years ago for the establishment of an agribusiness, has not undertaken any such business to date? And B, can a certified copy of the agreement between the Government of Grenada and Grenada Quality Meats Inc. be provided? And C, inform the Senate what action or actions government intends to take with regards to the 10 acres granted to Grenada Quality Meats Inc. in light of A above.
Mr. President, these questions were received only last week. They have been assigned to the relevant ministry. As soon as I receive a response, I will update the House.
Mr. President, that is a very unacceptable response. I mean, Mr. President, this issue with respect to quality meats has been around for some time. And the question, Mr. President, has been submitted on time. In fact, long before this sitting was scheduled. So that's very, very, very disturbing. It's very frustrating here, Mr. President. But I'll move on to question number 2.
He's awaiting a response.
Mr. President, that seems to be the modus operandi always with respect to important questions and the way the other side responds.
One second.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll move on to question number 2. A. Has the government of Grenada recently entered into an agreement with another entity for the grant of approximately 10 acres of land on the Laura Estate for the establishment of an agriculture project? B. If so, what is the name of the entity and the specific business enterprise? C. Please lay before the Senate a certified copy of that agreement. And D. Explain to the Senate why consideration is not given to affording our young and unemployed youth equal opportunity to access government-owned arable lands to pursue agribusiness ventures. Thank you.
Mr. President, as before, this question was received only last week. The senator on the other side is fully aware of the process, and we continue to go through this every single sitting. The questions are received. They go through various administrative channels within the ministry. They are assigned to the relevant ministries for the officers there to provide the necessary answers. These questions were received, like the next question that's going to be read out, only last week. The senator should also be aware that there were questions in his name that have been on the order paper, questions that have been prepared and answered by this side for a number of months, since the beginning of this year. The senator on the other side, I think this is I think, the first sitting out of about 2 or 3 that he's been able to attend this in this year. And there have been questions that keep rolling over because the senator on the other side isn't here to ask those questions. And at our last sitting in April, out of frustration, those questions were prepared in written form and formally submitted. So I think the senator on the other side needs to be certainly made aware of the process that we are following. And we have been answering questions in a timely manner. And the absence of the senator who is representing agriculture, who is not here to present his whole backlog of questions that have been answered, sat on the order paper for months, and as I said, simply submitted in writing because the senator isn't here to present or receive those answers.
Okay. Senator Plowden, let me... I was at the clerk's office it's Monday, last week, a week before Friday, was it? Week before Friday? Yes, week before Friday when the questions were presented to me. I sat there and then, made some appropriate adjustments and dispatched the matter right away. It was a week before Friday. I mean, I can certify that because I was in the clerk's office when the questions were presented to me. Normally, the questions would come to my office. Sometimes I am on island, sometimes I'm not, as the case might be. But on this particular occasion, those questions were in fact dealt with dispatch. So if the senator is reporting that he only recently received them, I could more or less vouch for that. So just be advised.
Mr. President, I don't know what the leader of government business is trying to impute, but for example, with respect to the preliminary damage report, assessment report for some damage that occurred in 2015, it took over a year to get the response. The response to those questions came on November, on the 21st of December 2016. So he doesn't know what he's saying, and he's not accurate in what he's saying. The only time that I have been absent and my questions were rolled over to, on one occasion, to another Senate sitting. And I don't think it's appropriate for the leader of government business to question my attendance here. In fact, it serves him better when I'm not here, perhaps, because he doesn't have to answer my questions. Like today, for example, Mr. President. Let me move on to question number 3, though. Yeah, that talk he's giving there, that isn't true. That isn't true at all. Question number 3. What you see, because these questions, I mean, it really speaks to the inefficiency in terms of the government service, right? Because these questions must be on hand in the Ministry of Agriculture. This guy got a lease 3 years ago. Easy to pull that, retrieve that. Anyway, thank you, Mr. President. Question number 3A. What is the total amount of money that was paid out to the affected farmers who lost crops and other agricultural materials as a consequence of the heavy rainfall on November 2nd, 2016? B. Please lay before the Senate certified copies of the final damage assessment report of the crops and other materials, agricultural materials lost by the farmers. That they can retrieve, Mr. President. C. Provide a list of the names of each affected farmer and the amount of financial relief received. And D. Explain why the farmers who lost crops and other agricultural materials on November 8th and 9th, 2015, due to heavy rainfall, have not received the relief assistance that they were promised to date. I mean, Mr. President, I don't want to, it's not a debate, you always say so. But there must be some room to explain. I mean, these people were compensated already. They can't retrieve that. Yes, Mr. President.
That the leader of government business indicated that he's awaiting responses. He have not indicated that he can't retrieve it. He said that he received the questions last week and he submitted to the appropriate place within the bureaucracy and he's waiting on a response. An individual minister don't go from ministry to ministry in search of a particular answer to a question, that's not how it occurs. So he's waiting, and I mean, we have to give reasonable time for that process to take its place. And I can confirm that I was at the parliamentary office, Parliament's office, a week before Friday when the questions came. Well, I can't say when the questions came, but when the questions came to my attention, and they were dealt with immediately. And it is only after I have looked at those questions and satisfied myself that they meet the requirements of the standing orders that the questions can then be sent forward. And I did that. I mean, the clerk, the assistant clerk is here, they can certify that. Yes. Senator Bernadine.
Thank you, Mr. President. And just a quick comment, but first let me apologize for being late this morning to the start of the Senate meeting, a few minutes late. I wanted to come out very strongly in favor of Senator Clowden's comments. I am amazed that the minister could indicate that over and over he comes here to this house and requests they have the same dialogue, and have you not improved on that performance, Minister? Every time you have also come and done exactly the same thing. Should it not be, this is the business of the people. And he's asking the questions as a result of the farmers and others concerned asking these questions, and there must be answers to them. We have been extremely tardy over the last year. It is not good enough. It is not good enough. And bears a clear stamp of being unable to manage the civil service. I mean, how can it take that length of time? I remember, Mr. President, commenting before in this exact position the length of time it takes to answer the questions. You see, it makes it look as if you're avoiding the questions because of the nature of what the questions are. If you open yourself for supposition on all sides. It is not acceptable, and I wanted to emphasize that. Whether the senator is here or not, if he isn't here, he's on legitimate business. And he would have thus communicated that to the president of the chamber. And therefore, it's acceptable. We must all accept his excuse and what has happened if he isn't here. The issue is the questions need to be answered. And it is frustrating the business of the people. And I'm saying that you need to manage this far more effectively through you, Mr. President, and get the answers to the questions, because we need to follow what is going on. It is humbugging the progress of the Senate. Thank you, Mr. President.
I mean, I'm being very liberal here because our questions are not an opportunity for a debate, and I've engaged your comments. But I can tell you, for my 25 odd years in the Senate, this is a perpetual problem. Senators who were here would recall that even on one occasion, I sought to change the standing orders to make it contempt, not to answer. But again, I say, it is not the individual minister, while the question may be put to the individual minister. The answer to that question is prepared by public officers. And you have to tread very carefully on this one with Senator Roberts being present. So that's all I would like to say. It is a frustrating process. I have had questions in this Senate here that have never been answered. All right? So I am well aware, I empathize with you. But that's the way the public service works. And I'm saying specifically on this occasion, the minister has no responsibility, because I knew when the questions came to me, and I knew that the questions were approved. And if he indicates, as he has done, that he's awaiting those answers, well, just let's give him an opportunity to get those questions. I think most of the questions that have come have been answered. Some have been delayed answers, but I don't think that there are any outstanding questions. I could be corrected if I'm wrong on this. As I say, some questions do take a long time and could be unreasonable in certain circumstances, but again, that's the state of the public service. And as you know, there are rules which govern that, and there are trade unions which represent the workers, etc., etc. So, well, could we?
Item 13, personal explanations. Item 14, motions. Item 15, bills.
Honorable Simon Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I beg to introduce for first reading a bill for an act shortly entitled Hydrocarbon Exploration Incentives Bill 2017.
An act to provide for incentives for investment in oil and gas exploration in the state of Grenada, shortly entitled Hydrocarbon Exploration Incentives Bill 2017.
Mr. President, I beg to move that the relevant standing order of the Senate be suspended to enable the bill to be taken through all its stages at this sitting.
Relevant suspended to enable the bill to be taken through all of its stages at this sitting. All those who have that opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary opinion say nay. I think the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Senator Steele.
Mr. President, I beg to move the second reading of the bill.
Honourable members, the question proposed is that the bill be read a second time.
Mr. President, this bill, the Hydrocarbon Exploration Incentive Bill 2017, seeks to provide incentives to attract investors in the exploration of oil and gas here in Grenada. Mr. President, as we all know, Grenada's maritime boundaries, include our neighbours, oil-rich neighbours, such as Trinidad and Tobago. Therefore, it's highly probable that there are significant oil and gas reserves within Grenada's maritime territory. Mr. President, there's been significant interest from many external companies with offshore seismic surveys having been carried out to determine the size and locations of those deposits. But, Mr. President, Grenada is considered virgin territory. There are no, as yet, established fines. So therefore, we're in the position right now where at the exploration phase, where further testing through test well drilling, etc., is required to better understand what lies beneath our seabed. This exploration phase is distinctly different from the other phases, development or production phases, which will follow, because this initial phase, this exploration phase, presents to those companies involved the greatest amount of risk, searching for oil or gas deposits that may or may not be found. And this is a very capital intensive period requiring significant financial investment, as I said, without any guarantees of success. So it's for these reasons that at this time, especially when oil and gas prices are in relative terms low, that we have to create a competitive environment to be able to attract those companies to come in and invest and to explore, to determine what natural resources exist here in our waters. So, Mr. President, what this bill seeks to do is to create that commercial environment that will attract those companies to come in. And for Grenada, if successful, to be able to monetize, to be able to generate revenue that will stimulate the economy, and realize the potential of those resources that quite probably exist in our waters. Mr. President, we have to be competitive in this phase. Grenada is not the only one with this potential. As I said, we have Trinidad to our south, Venezuela, Barbados, Guyana, all with significant oil and gas reserves. So if we want to seek interest, if we want to attract investors to come in and realize the potential that we have to be competitive. We have to make it attractive. Otherwise, we will not be able to attract those operators. They'll simply go elsewhere where a competitive environment exists. And Mr. President, any company operating commercially in Grenadian waters is subject to the laws of Grenada. And that will include the payment of duties and VAT on goods and services consumed, the payment of income tax, national insurance, on salaries, on earnings, and any other taxes that are applicable to that operation. And payment of these duties, of these taxes, of these levies pose a significant extra cost on the operations of those exploration companies, which could be spending upwards of $500,000 per day in their activities. And these activities will take place many weeks, many months. So we're looking at companies expending tens of, if not hundreds of millions of dollars to try and explore and develop those fields. And it's all, as I said, with the risk that they find nothing, so they're not generating any revenues. And this is especially the case when you have those other countries that I mentioned, Guyana, Trinidad, etc., who are offering tax concessions to those companies coming in to explore their resources. So these are the same principles. This bill that we have in front of us, an incentives bill that is focused on the oil and gas sector, is applying exactly the same principles that we have applied to our existing productive sectors, whether that is tourism, whether that's in education services, whether that's in agriculture, ICT, the medical fields, etc. And that is why we brought before this very House the incentives bill, GIDC incentives bill, which laid out all of the different sectors and all of the concessionary benefits that will be offered to help stimulate those existing sectors that we have. So what is before us is simply an expansion of that and effectively the addition of the oil and gas sector to that incentives regime. But Mr. President, once that company, once those operators move beyond the exploration phase, and it is established that there are commercially viable reserves of oil and gas, oil or gas, whatever that combination is, they determine the quality and the volume of that oil and or gas. Then, and the commercial viability is established, revenues will be generated, profits will be made, then another commercial agreement will come into force and will be applied to those companies. So there's still a need, even in the development and production stage, for Grenada's sector to be competitive, to ensure that those companies have that environment that makes it worthwhile for them and it makes it worthwhile for the government. But a separate agreement, competitive agreement, will be applied. So, Mr. President, going into the specifics of the bill that is before us. Clause 2 outlines the interpretation of this bill, and it defines exactly what hydrocarbon exploration investment means, which is any business activity surrounding or involving exploration and scientific research to determine A, the existence of a natural gas deposit of crude oil or natural gas in the state of Grenada, or the quality, quantity, or composition of that crude oil or natural gas. But it clearly states that it excludes any investments in the generation that generate any profits from a transaction involved in that activity. So, Mr. President, this confines this incentive package specifically to that first phase, that exploration phase, and excludes development and production. It also defines the qualifying investment. So the minimum investment that will be sought by an investor is $50 million. So upwards of investments in exploration, upwards of $50 million will qualify for the concessions that are outlined in this bill. Clause 3 goes through the customs exemptions and specifies the specific areas where customs duties will be exempt, and they include machinery and equipment, spare parts on that machinery and equipment. Mr. President, the equipment that is involved in exploration is significant. So therefore, this is a significant capital investment. So the removal of those customs duties on the importation of that equipment is of significant value to the investor. It also goes through those land-based operations. So if the operator is seeking to have onshore support operations, onshore support facilities, then provision is made for 6 motor vehicles. So whether it's transporting equipment, people, goods, networking elements, computers, hardware, software, and building materials and infrastructural materials for establishing an office or offices for their operations. So all of those items are exempt from customs duties. Then clauses 4, 5, and 6 cover taxation on income, on value-added tax, and national insurance. And this covers non-resident individuals who will be working within those facilities. So if you are resident, if you're domiciled in Grenada, you will be eligible for income tax, for VAT, for the payment of national insurance. However, if you are non-resident, then, and the salaries involved, the amount of staff, the amount of people that are involved in this operation could be significant. So they're able to work on a tax-free basis. But within this, and it's important to note this, the opportunities will be created for Grenadians to work within these operations. So, Mr. President, what I've outlined are the key areas. So, if it is exemption from customs duties, from income tax, from value-added tax, from national insurance, Mr. President, then these are all laid out to provide that competitive environment that will attract investment, exploration companies, not just singular, but companies to come and determine exactly what oil and gas deposits exist. And as I said at the beginning, it's important that we're able to offer something competitive. Grenada, the state of Grenada, cannot afford to embark on the exploration, on the production, on the development of the oil and gas sector. These are investments that are many hundreds of millions of dollars. But we are aware that once there are significant reserves there, that the revenues that will be generated from that will provide direct benefit to the people of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. And it's for those reasons, Mr. President, that I commend this bill for its second reading. I thank you.
Senator Burke.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I rise to offer some comments on the bill which is now before the House, and to start by saying that I agree with Senator Steele that the exploration and exploitation of hydrocarbon is serious business. It involves a tremendous amount of investment, and that those who are going to spend their monies in it are taking significant risks and expect to be duly rewarded for their risks. And so we must say that any attempt by a government to provide some inducements, some incentives for oil and gas explorers must be seen as a reasonable course of action. The question is not whether or not incentives should be offered. The question will perhaps be what should be the nature of those incentives? What should be the quantum of those incentives? Because at the end of the day, government's ultimate responsibility is to balance competing interests as far as the management and use of the state resources are concerned. On the one side, the government must take into account the risks that the investor is entering into and the fact that the investor would expect some reward for some returns on the investment. On the other side, the government must take into account that those who are charged with that responsibility, first and foremost, are really not owners. They are custodians. That ministers of government really are trustees of the public patrimony, that they cannot make decisions of their own accord for their individual benefit or on their own whims and fancies, that they must do what is necessary and right, taking into account not only their own interests, not only the country's short-term interests, but also the longer term for the nation as a whole, for its citizens, for the development, as they seek to develop a modern state, a modern democratic state, capable of sustaining a high quality of life for all of its citizens. So ultimately, this is the responsibility of the government. And so the fact that it is coming before us today and saying we want to pass some incentive legislation is not offensive in and of itself. We must make that absolutely clear before we speak. We must also say, Mr. President, that the comments that we will make here today are not directed at the investor, are not intended to question the honesty, sincerity, or motivations of the investor. Every investor invests their money because they want a return on their money. And when they come, they look for the best deal. It is for the government and the government officials to ensure that it finds the best deal for its citizens, while the investor seeks to find the best deal for its shareholders. That's the balancing of interests that the state is called upon to exercise. And the state, therefore, is in the unique position that it has sovereign authority. It's in the unique position that it has sovereign authority, that ultimately it gets to decide as a sovereign nation what is acceptable and what is not acceptable for the state. So it's important for us to make that point. Mr. President, if you would please allow me, I intended to say this before I begin. There is a funeral service today that a funeral service today. I'm sorry, yes. If you will allow me, please. I should have said this at the very beginning. There is a funeral service today for the partner of former Minister Alan Walker, who's passed and is being buried today, the mother of his children and his partner. And I would like to be able to attend the funeral service in the afternoon if possible. So I may not be able to stay for the entire proceedings today. I hope you would grant me your indulgence. It's sufficiently important that I make an appearance and pay my last respects. Thank you, sir. So I want to please, I do appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. President. So if I do have to run, it would be for that reason, and one other reason, that my mother is traveling today to the United States, and I would have to get her to the airport sometime during the course of the afternoon. But, Mr. President, I want to go back to this issue. As I listened to Senator Steele, one got the impression that this was a general bill that was being passed for whoever may come, that this bill is just intended at this stage for any potential investor who comes to Grenada and decides that they want to explore for gas, and that the government is putting these incentives in place to ensure that they are sufficiently attractive, as Minister Bowen said in his presentation, that those who are seeking to invest will not get up and run to St. Vincent. In other words, that the investors will just decide, listen, I come to Grenada not competitive enough, I go in St. Vincent or go in St. Lucia. Whether or not seismic work has been done, whether or not there are seismic surveys that demonstrate that there is some potential commercially significant deposits of hydrocarbon somewhere in the country's waters. But I want to say this. This bill comes on the tails of a presentation that was made by the Prime Minister, a national address on the 1st of June. And I think it's important for us to understand that the bill is not coming out of thin air. The bill is coming as a follow-through, as Minister Bowen said in his presentation in the lower house, as a follow-through to some other developments. On the 1st of June, when the Prime Minister spoke, Mr. President, and if you will allow me, I just want to make some quick observations on his comments. He says that he takes the opportunity to inform the nation of the status of the move towards petroleum development in the state of Grenada. He then mentions that the Global Petroleum Group, or GPG, was authorized by the government of Grenada to conduct a seismic survey to get deeper knowledge and clearer understanding of the precise location, extent, and shape of the prospective geological features within the specific blocks of Grenada's maritime territory. And then he goes on to say that the GPG has now gathered all of the available seismic data from surveys conducted in Grenada from the 1960s up to the present, and has integrated that into some kind of geological model, which can then be used for work as far as a drilling campaign is concerned. He then goes on to say, Mr. President, in that national address, that GPG had carried out all of the detailed studies of the most prospective geological features, and that they have now hired contractors, they have hired subcontractors and vendors, they've done all the engineering and logistical plans for the exploratory drilling campaign, and that we are on the verge of commencing drilling for oil and gas in Grenada within the next month or two. So this particular bill that is before us is a bill that is intended, perhaps in due course, will benefit other people in the abstract, but let's face it, what is being done here is a bill to ensure that as the GPG embarks upon this program, that some incentive structure is in place. Mr. President, that itself is not troubling. What is perhaps most troubling, Mr. President, is that the government continues, and this presentation this morning demonstrates that further. The government continues to play hide and seek with the nation. The government continues to play this kind of cloak and dagger relationship with the public as far as oil and gas is concerned. The government has entered into, I must make the point, Mr. President, this agreement that we're talking about here with the GPG is not a new agreement. This agreement dates back, Mr. President, to 2005. 2005. And Mr. President, what this government has been doing is failing to come in an open and transparent way to the public and talk about this agreement. Talk about the agreement. Say we have entered into an agreement with the Global Petroleum Group. Say what the terms and conditions of the agreement are. Let us have a national debate as to whether or not certain things are agreeable or not agreeable. Even before we enter into the agreement, have a discussion about what are the terms and conditions of the agreement. Ensure, Mr. President, that we do this in the right way. The government, even since 2013, even since coming back into office in 2013, as I will speak to the agreement in a moment, but even since coming back into office in 2013, if you look at the presentations that were made by the Prime Minister in the national addresses, in the budgets, about energy and oil and gas, what you see is comments like, we have decided, Mr. Speaker, we have decided that we will re-engage those with whom we have private contracts, that kind of wording. Afraid, it seems, to mention the word GPG. Afraid, it seems, to talk about what really are the terms and conditions of this agreement. And one has to ask, Mr. President, why is there this cloud of secrecy around the agreement? Why is there this cloud of secrecy around the agreement? Did the government ensure that the terms and conditions of the agreement are to the benefit of the country? The terms and conditions have never been explained to the public. When does the government plan to tell the nation what are the terms of the conditions of the agreement that it is now saying we want to give incentives to go forward to? When would the nation understand this? We must ask these questions. Did the government retain the services of experts, Mr. President, before it embarked upon this? It is important because if you're saying that you're giving incentives to the GPG to go forward, then the agreement itself must be under scrutiny to determine the sufficiency, the adequacy, the fairness of the incentives program, of the incentive package. We must know something about the agreement. We must know whether or not, in the longer term, the benefit to Grenada outweigh the disadvantage to Grenada. You can't talk about the incentives in the abstract. You have to talk about the incentives in the context of the overall benefit to the country of embarking on the program that we have embarked upon. And Mr. President, I believe it is absolutely important that we talk about this agreement and to let the public know why, Mr. President, we must say that the government has not been handling this matter very openly and very fairly. Mr. President, this agreement, as I said, dates back to 2005, and it's important for the public to understand its context. In July of Mr. President, in July of 1996, the government entered into an agreement with the RSM Corporation. This is a Texas-based oil company led by a gentleman called Jack Grindberg, an oil speculator, essentially. Given that gentleman and his company the rights to explore all of Grenada's maritime acreage, all of it, over 11,000 square kilometers of water. That agreement provided, Mr. President, that Mr. Grindberg will pay in return for that, over that 4-year period that the agreement was going to be valid, Mr. Grindberg would pay $19,000 US a year for that license. $19,000 US a year, Mr. President, is the equivalent of 16,000, more or less, 16,000 US a month. 1,600 US a month. Think of it this way. You are giving to somebody the right, Grenada's land space is 342 square kilometers. Grenada's maritime acreage is 11,500 and some square kilometers. In other words, you can see very quickly that we are almost 30 times, the water space of the country is almost 30 times the land space. It might be more than that. I'm just doing a very quick calculation here, so don't hold me on the number. But I'm saying, Mr. President, you are giving the entire acreage to somebody and saying to them, you pay me $1,600 US a month for that license. Mr. President, the students of the United States, the foreign students who are attending St. George's University, that are renting a one-bedroom apartment in Grandance. The students attending St. George's University, the foreign students, that are renting a one-bedroom apartment in Grandance is paying right now in excess of $1,600 a month. Think of it, US dollars. So this is what was given to Mr. Greinberg. Mr. Greinberg, of course, then decided that he wanted his license, and he applied formally for the license. The government, Mr. President, then decided, maybe because they realized what a boo-boo they had made, and Minister Bowen is at the heart of it. We'll talk some more about Minister Bowen on this. But in order to, they tried now to get out of the contract. The contract that they signed with the group, with the RSM Corporation, said, if the government breaches that contract, Mr. President, they will take the government to the International Center for the Settlement of Investment Disputes in the United States. This is a tribunal, an international tribunal administered by the World Bank to arbitrate in respect of commercial disputes around the world. The same body, by the way, that GrenLec has now taken the government of Grenada to in respect of the contract which GrenLec is saying that they have broken and which they are now claiming, GrenLec is now claiming $179 million against the government of Grenada before that tribunal. So, Mr. Greinberg takes the government to ICSID, to the ICSID tribunal. The matter is now before arbitration. While the matter is before arbitration, 2005, Mr. Bowen engages the Global Petroleum Group. And, Mr. President, on September the 28th, 2005, the government enters into a relationship, a funding agreement is signed between the government of Grenada and the Global Petroleum Group, in which the government gives to the GPG exploratory rights or exploration rights over what is defined or referred to as 11 blocks. These blocks, as I will show later, are not blocks that are recognized by our country, are not blocks in law, were blocks that were drawn up by the RSM Corporation itself for its own purposes, about 40 blocks. The blocks, by the way, Mr. President, on average are between 5 and 6 times the size of a regular block of most countries in terms of its dimensions. Yes? But let me see. 11 blocks defined by themselves are being discussed as the subject of this agreement. It says, Mr. President, that the GPG will get the right to explore over these blocks, these 11 blocks. And in return, the government, the GPG, is going to pay the government's cost for the arbitration that is taking place between the government and the Texas-based company. So in exchange for giving this 11 blocks, the company will pay the arbitration costs, all legal costs and damages associated with the arbitration proceeding that is brought before the tribunal. Mr. President, what was interesting about this agreement is that the agreement itself says...
Mr. President?
The agreement itself says...
Mr. President, I'd like to standing order. 37.1, Mr. President, in terms of relevance, the matter that Senator Burke is raising and going into significant detail on is a matter that went to arbitration, that was settled, the government won, is a matter that is long closed, is not, absolutely not relevant to the bill that is in front of us. So, according to Standing Order 37.1, which speaks to the relevance of the comments to this bill, what is being discussed right now is completely irrelevant from the subject, and I've asked that the senator on the other side move on to his substantive comments with regard to the bill that's in front of us.
There's a challenge on the relevancy rule of the standing order, which I will bring to your attention. Standing Order 37.1, debate on any motion, bill, or amendment shall be relevant to such motion, bill, or amendment, except in the case of a motion for the adjournment of the Senate. You have to help me to see the relevance. The bill before us speaks specifically to relief of certain taxes, NIS, and other charges which exist in law, but which the government wishes to give relief to a potential investor who wants to come in to explore for oil or hydrocarbon resources. Show me the connection between that and the Greensburg matter and the issue of the agreement that you have been referring to, because this essentially just gives relief on duties. Well, it's listed here, there are 6 clauses. How is that related to your last 7-8 minutes of debate?
Thank you, Mr. President. I thought I had offered an explanation of that connection earlier on in my presentation, but I will repeat for the benefit of the senator. What is before us is a bill to grant incentives to prospective hydrocarbon investors, including the Global Petroleum Group. Yes? In debating that particular package of incentives, one must determine its sufficiency, its adequacy, its fairness, its reasonableness in the context of the agreement which precedes it. This is not a matter which stands on its own. Yes? This is not a matter which stands on its own. If Sandals is coming to Grenada, and I'm going to give a package of incentives to Sandals, I have to weigh that package of incentives to Sandals against the size of its investment, its employment potential, and a number of other factors that will determine.
Yes, Senator Burke. But what I'm not following is this. If Sandals makes an application for investment incentive, this bill doesn't specify. It says it's a bill that makes an amendment to existing law for anyone who may wish to come in and invest. It's not specific to any particular person. So because you don't know who may invest, or even if they're existing investors, you don't know who may come in, how could you then determine what you are saying? So that is a challenge I have here, that the bill is very exact and specific. All right? And I can't see, quite frankly, I can't follow the connection between the matters that you have introduced and the bill before us.
Mr. President.
And that's my challenge.
Mr. President, you say you don't know who may come in. I read from the Prime Minister's speech as to who may come in. Now we can dance around it, but we know who is coming in. Who is coming in? The Global Petroleum Group.
But what I'm saying to you, Senator Burke, the bill before us is not a bill for the for that particular group. the bill before us makes no reference to any particular group.
No, Mr. President, I agree with you. But it speaks to any potential investor that is coming in. And there can be absolutely no doubt that the Global Petroleum Group is one of the potential investors that will be affected by this hydrocarbon bill. Not only will it be one of them, it will be the first of them. It will be the first of them, because the government says that in 1 or 2 months, the Prime Minister says, in 1 or 2 months, a drilling campaign will begin. Now, Mr. President, it is your authority to decide whether we're going to push this under the table, under the cloth, under the carpet, or whether or not we're going to talk about it. Because at the end of the day, there can be absolutely no doubt, there can be absolutely no doubt that the GPG stands to benefit, will be affected, will be a beneficiary, will be the first beneficiary under this hydrocarbon legislation. And my plea
Senator
to you...
Burke, my question to you is this. Is your argument that the removal of NIS for expatriate persons who are coming in here to work, because the bill is very specific. The bill is not wide-ranging, it's very specific. And that's my challenge. My challenge is that your debate goes all over the place. And I think that Senator Steele has a valid concern, and this is why I'm asking you to help me. I'm not convinced. You haven't helped me significantly or sufficiently enough.
Mr. President, I will not be able to help you beyond saying this. The agreement that was entered into between the government of Grenada and the GPG provides certain rights and obligations to the parties.
But this bill does not address these. This bill is very
well
focused. This bill says we are going to remove the application of income tax, cap 149, specifically. It's going to do the same thing on the national insurance law, specifically. And it details in the 6 clauses where specifically this relief would be given.
Right, Mr. President.
And it's going to give it to anyone who has an interest in exploration.
Right, Mr. President, if you would just allow me, I was trying to see that I can help you to this extent. You asked me the question.
So you have to show me how this bill is connected to whatever agreement or any other agreement, theoretically or otherwise.
Well, Mr.
Because
President,
all this says here is if you make an application to explore for hydrocarbons within the territory of the state of Grenada, you can be guaranteed to get these reliefs.
Right.
And it's
right.
This here is not dependent upon some agreement which you may have.
But
that's not what the law is saying. The law is saying, look, once you make an application, before you make an application, you would know what relief that you are going to get. The bill isn't making this conditional upon some arrangement. And unless you can show me that, I will have to uphold the objection under the rules
yes, we understand,
of relevance.
We understand your position, Mr. President, but I want to say this.
Well, understand my position on the rule.
Well, that's what we are talking about.
Good.
Yes, we understand your position. But, Mr. President, what I want to say is this. You have an agreement. A bill comes before the House that provides incentives. You want to debate the propriety of the incentives. You want to debate their sufficiency, their fairness, their suitability. This fairness and suitability of the bill cannot be discussed or evaluated in the abstract. That is why Minister Steele, in his presentation, spoke about Barbados and Guyana. You did not stop him. And the reason you didn't stop him, even though Barbados is not relevant, Guyana is not relevant, Trinidad is not relevant to what we're discussing here about incentives for Grenada.
Senator Burke, I think, Senator Burke. He made that comment en passant. That wasn't the substantial component of his argument. He made that en passant as a passing statement. But substantially, you've brought this debate to be premised upon some agreement. And we are saying to you that show me the connectivity between this, because this bill isn't premised upon any agreement. The bill that is before us simply says that anyone who comes to explore will have these packages, this package, it's one package of relief from taxes and duties, and that is enunciated in the bill. Simple.
Right.
There's no other basis upon which this is premised. And to me, it makes sense. Because from your line of argument, unless you know the investor, then you can't give these incentives. And in the kind of environment, well, I'm saying that's the logic to me.
No, Mr. President, respectfully, that is not my line of argument. My line of argument is much more rational and is much more fundamental. That is not my line of argument. My line of argument, Mr. President, is this. We are entering into a discussion about the sufficiency of a package of incentives, one. Two, in determining...
And there are 6 such incentives here.
In determining the sufficiency, Mr. President, of that package of incentives, we must weigh the surrounding circumstances. You say en passant, that's fine. That's an escape clause. You say en passant. But whether we do it en passant, or we do it directly, or we do it substantially, we must weigh the essence and propriety of the incentive package. You can't determine the incentive package and its suitability in the abstract. You must look at all of the surrounding circumstances to determine whether or not the package that is put before the House ought or ought not to be approved. That is the fundamental responsibility of the House. So please allow me, Mr. President. Thirdly, even though the package does not speak to any one particular investor, we know beyond doubt that that package will impact upon, will affect that particular investor. That is beyond doubt. The Prime Minister in his national address has made that absolutely clear. Mr. Bowen in his address to the lower house has made that absolutely clear. Yes? Now, if we know that this package is going to be made available to this particular investor, it may well be that because he is the first, that is the only guide that we have. That is the only signpost that we have. That is the only standard that we have against which we must evaluate the package. It may well be that when the time comes, this law may have to be changed depending on when new investors come with new proposals.
But that's the nature of law, Senator Burke. And I mean, you're not connecting these dots for me, and therefore I can't
Mr. President,
Mr. Burke, we can't continue this whole day. I mean,
I understand.
The debate is not with me.
I may never.
The debate is with the House.
I understand, Mr. President.
I thought that I had overextended my generosity on this matter. I can't